Once again, we're sitting back a bit, trying not to cough. Yes, that's exactly why we are running a bit late. The good news is I have Diana on my show this morning, and I think it's going to be an interesting show. In fact, I have a fly right there. Do you see that? Wow. Or is that a gnat? Could be a gnat. But this is what we're going to do this morning. We are going to talk about atheism and theism in this sense. I keep saying that atheism and theism have nothing compelling. And I want to invite those of you who don't agree with me to put some substance on the table concerning your position. Simply because when I look at theism and when I look at atheism, and then I look at the question of God, in my mind's eye, this is what I see to be somewhat true. When you form an opinion on the question, for instance, if you form an opinion and it goes like this, oh, I believe in God. Well, typically people lean that toward theism or the theistic model. If someone says, oh, when it comes to the question of God, I can't buy into that. Well, both isms, if you will, both isms are an opinion or a response to the question. I also believe that if a person says, well, we really don't have anything available, anything compelling, so I'm just going to do what? I'm going to suspend judgment. Hence, it's not about belief or lack of belief to me. It's simply about waiting until we have something available to work with. And so that's the conversation that I want to have with Diana this morning. And I'm coughing. She's not. She has a better voice than I do. So go for it, Diana.
Oh, my good morning. Yeah, that's a very interesting thing that you say about forming an opinion or suspending judgment. I'm thinking myself, I'm still leaning in the atheist. Well, I call myself an atheist. And I think it's basically because I am suspending judgment.
Okay.
Depending on,
Okay. But let me stop you because I want to be clear about what you're saying. You're saying I'm suspending judgment, but not really, because I have formed an opinion on whether there is a God or not.
well, I'm conducting myself as if there were none, because I really don't have to come to the conclusion that there is one. Does that make sense?
I realize that I don't have to come to the conclusion on X, Y, or Z, but my question would be, if I asked you, and I'm going to go back to this analogy because I think that it makes sense. If I am teaching algebra and I ask little Johnny and little Susie a question about A plus B equals C, we could say, well, C minus B equals A. That makes sense. But if little Johnny says, oh, I know what A is a goat. And Susie says, oh no, A is not a goat. I would simply say it's possible that A is a goat, and I would say to them, I'm suspending judgment. And it's true that Susie could be right, and it's true that Johnny could be right. And so, but both of those could be wrong. In this case, we're dealing with something that's a little bit binary. Either God exists or He doesn't. But not really, because existence is it's tied to an axis, and a lot of people who are in theology, they study theology as a means to approach the question. They don't claim to be theist in the philosophical sense. They're not trying to make a claim that God exists. They're just trying to approach the question. So, once again, I want you to be clear to me, because if I suspend judgment, have I suspended judgment like as to what A is? A could be a goat, it could be not goat. But when people, when I speak to atheists, most atheists are like little Susie. when little Susie starts talking about, no, it's not a goat. Damn, that's bullshit. It's not a goat. When they start talking like that, that is a position. Would you agree with that?
Oh, surely that is a position. And,
I mean, it's very much a viewpoint, correct?
oh, yeah, yeah.
Very much a belief set.
Which is why I tend, if somebody asks me, do you believe God exists? First thing I'll do is say, which one? Because the God of William Lane Craig, the one he describes, the one that is outside of space and time, and yet interacted with humans in space and time, I tend to think that, okay, maybe that one is self-contradictory. But depending upon how you define a God, it may or may not exist. And if it does, fine. I'd like to talk to that God. Really and truly. Have a beer, have a conversation.
Okay, let's approach the question of God like this. Let's put a circle around existence. Can we do that?
All right, I'm moving my finger in the air. There's a circle.
Okay, we have a circle around existence. Is it possible that God created existence, if there is a God?
Yeah, I'd say so. Sure.
And if existence isn't eternal, do we have anything that is in reality, that is through the eyes of a human being, the mind's eye of a human being? Are we looking at existence as being eternal?
I'd say that from everyday experience, we see existence as temporal. We really don't know of anything that is eternal. Now, if
Okay.
you want to talk to a physicist, you may get a different idea.
So when it comes to infinity, terms like eternal and all of that, if meant, that is, in usage without beginning or end, we can say, I would bet that most people would say that evolution has an origin.
Oh, it has to.
Okay,
You have to have
that's
life already existing in order to mutate and reproduce and continue and die off. So yeah, you have to have a starting point.
Okay, you have to have a starting point. When it comes to existence, this is the position that many theologians take when it comes to existence, when it comes to evolution. If there is a God, he's well outside of what we call existence. Hence, he
Okay.
doesn't exist. Hence, we would have to look at God as possibly the creator of existence, the creator possibly of evolution. And so what we are observing, that is through scientific methodology, is this evolutionary process, namely within the framework of existence. Does that make any sense?
Okay, so far so good, but I've got a little question, and
Sure.
I'm really not trying to be a bitch here, but the question that always comes to my mind, if that God that is outside of existence and created existence happens to be the God of the Christian Bible, how did that God interact with Moses and Abraham and the people that were hanging around when Jesus got baptized? Because as I'm seeing it, maybe I've got it wrong here, maybe I'd have a discussion and refine my position, but if that God did interact with those people, that God would then be inside existence. And
Well,
I'm still on that binary thing. I can't see how you
oh.
can be in and outside of existence at the same time.
well, this is the problem that I have. One of the things that I don't want to do is to get the cart before the horse.
Okay.
And I really don't care to conflate. In other words, if we can for a moment, let's put all isms like the Christian model of God, okay, or the Islam model of God. Let's put all of those concepts and notions to the side, okay?
Done.
Okay.
Okay.
So
They're over there.
it's if we can be fair to the question, and I think that we need to be, if we are simply looking at the term, I have to be honest, I can't even define the term without making stuff up. In other words, I'm throwing the word creator at God. Okay? I have absolutely nothing compelling to suggest that I should do that. I'm just playing, in a sense, a game, okay? And
Okay,
I'm,
hypotheses are not bad.
okay, but I'm well aware that if I'm suspending judgment, some of these games being played hypothetically, they can be very, very useful. And so let's say God, but let's say God without conflating God with existence for a few minutes, okay?
Alrighty, we can do that.
Okay, let's say God without conflating God with one who has to somehow interact with existence. It may be true this God could be a God who doesn't have the capacity to do so. You know, most models of God have God as this all-powerful, all-knowing, blah, blah, blah. I'm not wanting to do that. Let's just say, when it comes to the question of God, let's, in a sense, just keep God a bit cleaner than what we see in theistic modeling typically. In other words, here we have God, here we have existence, and we didn't have existence before God. Now, when I say before, I'm certainly working with Arrow's time instead of a cyclic model of time. And there are various mindsets concerning time here, but let's just, for the sake of simplicity, let's say we have God, but God is not an existing God, but existence is something that God created. And within this existence, we find he created, he and or she, I'm simply using the masculine pronoun, simply if people understand that usage, they will understand that it's plenary. You know, it's all over the place. It doesn't mean a male. Okay, so it's fine to call God he, no big deal. And so if he created existence to evolve and is somewhat happy with wherever evolution takes existence, why would this God interact with humanity, a frog, a billy goat, or anything within the context of existence? And see, this is the thing that I don't get from theists, is this honesty of saying, wow, maybe God, if he is this creator, maybe he values the process of evolution just as much as he does human beings. And we, in the atheistic, theistic debate, we're always hearing, well, I wouldn't serve a God who would allow, you know, a person to starve to death or whatever, you know. And yet at the same time, I find atheists perfectly content with evolution and how that process happens, and they find much awe in that, but that doesn't acknowledge the question of God, because if God created existence without the notion of interacting with it, created existence just with the idea that, hey, I'm going to create this whatever, this existence, to evolve, and I'm completely happy with it, not going to get entangled with that at all. I'm not going to conflate myself with that if I'm God. Why would that be not a model that we would look at?
All right, hang on to your chair.
I'm
Are you
hanging.
sitting? Are you sitting?
I'm sitting.
I'm perfectly fine with a God like that. I have no problem at all.
Okay, so
If that God wants to create a universe and then sit back and have a beer and watch it go, hey, no problem.
So it's almost like watching a movie. I enjoy watching movies. If you haven't seen this show, you need to watch it. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? I mean, a lot of things are going south, but I don't want to interrupt the movie, okay?
I'm going to have to pull that out.
Okay, so this movie with Elizabeth Taylor and Burton in it. I mean, these people are brilliant at their craft. I didn't want to interrupt that. I just wanted to see what was going to happen. And it could be true that God, in this model that I'm presenting, he's not this know-it-all. And so, in a sense, evolution, existence it's almost like theater to him. What's going to happen next? He's, drinking coffee much like I am. Now I'm pretending. We're just bullshitting a bit this morning. But my question is, in my mind's eye, I keep thinking, if I suspended judgment, I don't think that I'm going to be, if I truly suspended judgment, I'm not going to be a theist and I'm not going to be an atheist, because the atheist is very much like little Susie in my analogy. And the theist is very much like little Johnny. A is a goat. And the other one wants to negate that, just say, I deny that. Well, both have committed themselves to forming an opinion. There's something within them that said, yeah, I can form an opinion on A, correct? And I'm simply saying that we have far less stuff to work with when it comes to God, and yet in algebra we would say, little Johnny, little Susie, oh my goodness, if you're going to practice the discipline of algebra, you're not going to say goat or not goat. And so what I hear in the conversation, what I keep hearing in the great debate, I keep hearing atheists who say, God, no, that's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. And the other people are saying, it's not bullshit, it's not bullshit. The goat is A, the goat is A, and they keep going back and forth, and it becomes just noisy. It doesn't become algebra. Does that make any sense to you, Diana?
Yeah, it does. It really, really does.
So if we're going to do algebra, isn't it best to say, settle down, kids? For those of you who are arguing A is goat, you're not going to get a good grade in this class. That's not algebra. That's not the way that we approach things in a discipline. And so those people who are trying to approach algebra in the same sense, but just negating what little Johnny has said, like little Susie is in this context, isn't she, in a sense, just as guilty as little Johnny, jumping into something that they should not have?
I think I see where you're coming from there.
And so why
If they don't have
form
enough
an
information to
opinion?
form an opinion, why do it?
So why should I form an opinion on whether God exists or whether there's a God without existence? Do you see my point? In other words, there's a question, does God exist? Is there a God, that is, who doesn't exist in this context? There are many different questions that we can ask ourselves, but at the end of the day, we can toy around with the stories, and we can use analogy, just like the algebra teacher would say, well, let's see what we have. Let's look at the many possibilities of what could be A, but at the end of the day, I have to suspend judgment. We don't have anything. We have nothing. And so when I say we have nothing concerning atheism and theism, when I keep saying atheism and theism have nothing compelling, I'm looking at it like this: A plus B equals C, and I'm not going to tell you what A is until I have something to work with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure, definitely.
And so I'm going to teach people, if I'm trying to teach my grandkids, hey, and my grandkids are far beyond this. They know that they're not going to say, A is a goat. I mean, my grandchildren are in the studio audience now, and they keep saying, I'm suspending judgment on A. But mature adults, yes, 4 horsemen on both sides of the fence, they are saying, we're not suspending judgment. We're scientists. We're all about the age of reason. We're all about this great and marvelous stuff that's called reasoning. What's reasonable about forming an opinion on what A is when you have absolutely nothing to work with? What is reasonable about forming an opinion on the question of God when you have nothing to work with? Go for it.
Okay, I'm going to jump about 6 steps ahead here.
Sure.
Maybe in the same way that I've been reviewing my use of the word faith, maybe I have to review my use of the word atheism. What I'm after is I am not accepting people who tell me this is what my God wants, and you're going to burn if you don't do that. This morning, maybe a couple hours ago, I was responding to a Catholic apologist with whom I'm currently locking horns. The man's name is Trent Horn. He has said, Jesus rose from the dead, therefore you, meaning me, are imaginary. Because he's very, very anti-trans. Now, that's what I oppose. I'm opposing, and I think you are too, the way it sounds, he's forming an opinion without anything to go on, yet he is going to work to support and demand legislation that excludes people like me, people like, gay, lesbian folks, anybody he doesn't like.
Right.
And he's going to base that on his God.
But see, I think
The
you're
God
making
I
my.
oppose.
But see, I think you're really making my point well. In other words, these people
hope so.
who are forming an opinion on a question when they have nothing, they tend to be radical. They tend to be extremists. They tend to bitch about things. They tend to condemn other people who are not like them. None of this makes sense. When I meet people in the atheistic and theistic communities, I find people to be bigoted. In other words, they won't tolerate any other opinion than what they have confirmed with their own little small set of facts. And when you have facts that would challenge their fact, no, it's atheism, or theism. And something is going wrong in both of these isms. And I'm simply admitting, if you find yourself to be an atheist, so be it. Okay, I'm going to applaud you and love you. But please admit you don't have anything compelling. You formed an opinion on a question that you're not competent to, number one. If you are, come on this show and just demonstrate it to me, because I'm simply claiming I'm not competent to the question. I'm simply playing cartoon logic here. I make things up simply to try to create models to see how we could even get there. I don't know that we have a methodology to even suggest anything concerning evidence. I know how evidence works in the disciplines, but I don't know of a discipline concerning God where we actually have a methodology to measure out what we call evidence. And so I'm having a lot of problems here. And so I have a lot of pushback in the community because people love this bitching game going on. And I'm saying, hey, listen, this is not a real fight. This is like fake wrestling. It's set up, guys. It reminds me of the one percenters. They want people at the bottom of the pyramid to fight and have a lot of tension because it distracts them. And I'm afraid that the four horsemen of atheism are just like, in a sense, analogous to the four horsemen that we always find in theism. Just a bunch of people who want to rant and rave over something that they're not competent to. That is the question of God. They're not even being sensible or rational in their approach toward the question, are they?
No, they are not competent at all.
Are you
And it's
calling
really sad.
Richard Dawkins not competent to the question of God in all of his rhetoric? Is that true?
It could well be. I mean, he's an evolutionary biologist. That's where his competence lies. As far as being a theologian, I don't know that he's put any degree of study into it. I don't know that he's put as much study into it as I have, and I haven't done all that much.
If I would invite Richard Dawkins to be on this show, because I would like to know what kind of methodology did he use to say, well, on a scale of 1 to 7, I would say 6.7, I think, is the rating that he gave as to whether there might be a God of some kind or not. And so my question is, how did he come up with that number? That's not what we do in any other discipline. And I know that he's not doing that by biological means and methods. and practices. This is the thing that alarms me. These people who are very well disciplined are jumping into this question, and they're giving us just more bullshit so we can, what? Conflate, confuse, and just have an us versus them moment instead of a this versus that, something that's really competent and comfortable and actually uplifts humanity.
I'm all for that. I'm with you 100%.
It really doesn't sound like you're an atheist. It seems like you're just sick and tired of all these people who put you down because you are who you are. I accept you for who you are. You don't sound like an atheist,
Okay.
Diana.
Dankeschön.
You know what you sound like? You sound like someone who has suspended judgment and really is only forming an opinion on these crazies who want to put all their theistic shit on you. Is that true?
I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to say that's it.
There you go. So you're really not an atheist. You're coming
Maybe
out of the
I'm not.
closet.
And I said it a little while ago. Maybe I've got to look for another word. Now
What's wrong with agnostic? You know, these people who claim to be agnostic in this sense, agnostic can mean, one of the usages would be, I don't know. Another usage that we see that other people are using, and I'm very comfortable with it. Words have usage, not inherent meaning, by the way. Agnostic, What does that mean? It simply means, with some people, it simply means, I'm suspending judgment. And so what's wrong with being agnostic? When it comes to the question of A plus B equals C, I want to do real algebra. I want to suspend my judgment concerning A. I don't have anything. And so you can ask me until the cows come home, what is your evidence of God, and play that game, but it's almost like a chess match. We can always figure out a way to construct a game. And so are gamers forming this debate because it's gaming? It's not science. Hello.
Yeah, I was doing a little coughing there myself. No, I'm with you.
You don't sound like an atheist. You're not an atheist, are you?
I'm probably not when you really come down to it. I mean, I have no problem with the kind of God you described, who.
But see,
made the
I'm
world.
describing something that I'm just making up. That's all I'm describing. And I'm
Yeah,
simply
but
saying I have nothing.
I still like what you're saying. What I don't like are the people who are constructing their own gods to make their own points, which make a lot of people unhappy. Let's not limit the discussion to trans or gays and lesbians. Let's go to other things. What about women's reproductive rights? What about reproductive health for them? People using their constructed God to tell women, no, you don't have control over your own body. No, I'm an atheist with respect to that God. Your God, not you, but that person's God.
Right. But would it not be better to say, hey, listen, I'm not going to put myself in the position of saying, I want to use this alpha privative in this broad stroking way. I mean, isn't that what took place years ago? I mean, white people would say, those blacks. And they would just group all black people together. Isn't it true that when when people say, I've met a handful of theists and they've just condemned the hell out of me, let me just put an alpha privative in front of it, and so therefore all theism is wrong. I've just offered you a theistic model. You don't have a problem with it. But when you start putting that alpha privative in front of that model of theism that I presented to you, because I'm very much not a person who believes in that, I'm simply offering it as a model. I don't have anything. I have nothing compelling. I stand naked in the sense of knowing anything. I don't know anything about God. I'm struggling here. I need help. All of you guys who are Gnostic atheists and Gnostic theists, come on this show and provide me your knowledge. I don't know. I'm at a loss. I simply admit I don't know what A is, and I don't know what in the hell God is. And so I have suspended judgment. If I need to be saved, so be it. If you want to call me Lucifer, Satan, whatever, so be it. I'm struggling. I want to know. Diana wants to know. I think that some of us are just honest enough to say, I don't know. And we find that, just being honest with ourselves is as good as it gets. But isn't it true that we use that alpha privative sometimes just to say, well, that's a theist over there. I'm not a theist. But I can't just say, let me shove it onto the word theist or the term theism all the time, because that almost becomes like a person saying, all those blacks, all black people are that way. Isn't that true? It's almost like being a racist.
Yeah.
It's
and
broad stroking.
that alpha primitive may be politically expedient, but then again, the politics and the really deep, if you want to call it that, philosophy are two different things. I personally am trying to do two different things when it comes to those two different things. I'm very willing to explore the question, as we are right now. Could there be a God? Could there be a God existing? That sort of thing. But when it comes to the Trent Horns of the world, the Ken Hams of the world, I've got to take a powerful stance, at least as powerful as theirs, to try to persuade the listener of the invalidity of the points that these guys are making. That you're going to burn if you question your gender. You're going to burn if you want control over your own body. I may have to use that term atheist in those arenas. But here's Sid. I don't even think much about atheism or theism. Who was it? Was it Steven Weinberg that said, we don't really spend enough time thinking about whether God exists or not to worry about whether we are atheists. And maybe that's the position I'm taking.
Right. I get that. I don't know. I find that, the conversation keeps going south and south and south and south. I remember the day, and I'm so old. Unfortunately, I wish I could get old and my body wasn't falling apart. Yesterday, I lost an uncle, and boy, I tell you what, he was better than Jesus, by the way. That hurt.
I saw that. My condolences to you.
And it just, it was hard. But when I was a kid, people would ask the question. And the question was typically in church, it was modeled like this: are you a homosexual or a heterosexual? And it was like, if you're not heterosexual, you would have to be a homosexual. And I thought, wow, what a terrible thing to do, to try to place a person in this category or that category. And I asked my father when I was a kid, I happened to be reading a few books other than the Bible.
Oops.
I asked him, I said, Dad, why are these church people always talking about, they're always fighting against homosexuals. They don't really understand homosexuality, and they're only for heterosexuals. I said, have they ever read books that talk about not just homosexuals and heterosexuals, but they've read enough science to see that some things are asexual? And he just paused. And he said, Michael, he said, you're trying to think outside of the realm of the Holy Ghost. And I said, well, there are other books than Holy Ghost books. And he said, well, you're right. I said, we happen to build ships not in the name of Holy Ghost science, but we build ships based upon people who know how to work with wood and metal and fiberglass and all that. And so he started getting a lot of that. And so he started seeing, wow, we shouldn't just place people in this category or that category. There are many more options. And unfortunately, when it comes to the question of God, people have formed very much like Arn Ra, and I love Arn Ra. He's a great guy, okay? Love him to death. But
He's a big sweetie, yes.
Okay, but it's almost as if there are only two options in life here, guys. And it reminds me of the guy on the street corner, turn or burn, two options. Why can't a person be an atheist, for instance? I don't know that we can even speak about the question, and please look it up, Google it a bit, so I don't have to explain it at this point. But
I
I'm simply
remember
saying
Ozzy
there should
talking
be
about
more
atheists, so
options
yeah.
available to the question, simply because the landscape of the question, it's so messy. We're so far away from having anything compelling. Why can't we talk without becoming, goat or goatish people? And so we have the goatites and we have the non-goatites, okay? And so I don't get why people want to just, go theistic or atheistic. It doesn't make sense to me.
I don't know. I guess it doesn't make that much sense to me either. As I say, I don't, in my private time, me and Sil sitting around together, I really don't think about the question all that much. It really doesn't matter, really. It only matters when I'm dealing with people who are trying to advance political agendas
Right.
based upon whatever God, whatever so-called theology they have constructed. Now, that's a different question altogether.
Right. But, you're trans. And if someone were
Last I
trying,
checked.
I beg your pardon?
Last I checked, I was indeed trans.
Okay. Now, if someone was trying to push homosexual or heterosexual down your throat as if there isn't a lot more to this than just these two strongholds, would that not piss you off?
That actually would. I got turned around, if you will. I got a heck of a shock a few years ago. I thought I was as lesbian as the day was bright. And then I fell for Ron. He turned out to be a jerk, but I fell for a guy. And I'm looking at myself and I'm saying, wait a minute. Are you as lesbian as you thought you were? And I guess I'm not. So, yeah.
When it comes to humanity, I like to give human beings enough room to figure out who they are, because most people in our lifetimes, they come along with all these labels. It's black and white. Everything is black and white. We have no gray areas. We can't suspend judgment, doggone it. Either you're this or that, atheist or theist. And yes, the atheists are about the age of reason. Can't you tell? No. I mean, if atheists, all these people who are presidents of all these different atheist associations, if you're trying to sell me that you're about science, you have pitifully failed. People in science are ignoring the great debate. That's why Bob Graves and I keep saying the great debate is not so great. In fact, it's pitiful. And I would think that more atheists would say, let me put down this atheism, because it's just as radical and not rational as theism. And notice I use the word not rational. There's a difference between being irrational and not rational.
Oh, yeah.
And so when it comes to theism, what is there about theism that's rational? I don't see anything. But it doesn't mean that it's not. I just can't see it. I need to learn something from some theist or someone who can say, it is a rational position to take. I'd like for someone to put something on the table, and I've had so many people over the years on the show who say, yeah, this is the rational position. Why? It's a viewpoint. It's a viewpoint toward the question. And why did you take that leap to say, yeah, everything on that side is bullshit. Why would you say everything on that side or this side is bullshit? I don't get that. Why can't you suspend judgment when it comes to the question? It's simple in algebra. We do it all the time. But when it comes to the question of God, we're jumping. And that jump, in a sense, is a leap. And people don't like to hear this, but it's almost like a leap of faith. You can call it just a leap of incompetence. But I'm simply asking the major league atheist and theist to come on this show and put up or shut up. That's simple. I'm not going to be rude to you. I'm not going to interrupt you. I'm not going to ask you questions that are gotcha questions. I'm going to respect you. If you want to live all the days of your life being an Eric Hovind, so be it. I will support you as a human being. I will love you. I will nurture you. I will do that for you. If you want to be a Richard Dawkins and step outside of the realm of your discipline and start, this rant, I'm going to respect you as a person. I'm going to respect where you are disciplined, but I'm just asking, for something so simple. Please provide to me why you wrote a book about, the delusion. I get that so many people are selling and marketing theology outside of discipline, and I don't like it that theology is so undisciplined. It needs to be cleaned up. And Richard, if you're listening, please help those of us who care about exploring the question, help us to make theology into a discipline. Let's walk away, if you will, away from those people who just want to make it into, well, this is doggone the truth, nothing but the truth, blah, blah, blah. And this is why I keep not selling. Maybe I'm selling it. I can be honest enough to say that, but to me, this makes sense to me. I have a perspective of truth, not truth itself. That's all I have. And so whatever my perspective is at this point on A, B, C, or D, it is. And so I'm simply saying, and I'm reading some of the comments here, both in private messaging and all of that, I keep seeing one thing that is obvious. I see people who are in as much doubt as I am about why people leaped into theism, why people leaped into atheism. I think we can do better than both isms. And so if we're on the same page like this show, let's share this show a bit. This is something that I think that we need to talk about. Let's talk about atheism and theism long enough to where we can say, wow, why did we ever commit to either position? I mean, is it doing us any good in a humanistic sense? I don't think so. I think that atheism is just as incompetent of a position as theism. And so my point is, let's back away from that. Let's develop methodology that is to the question, and it may not happen in my lifetime. And I'm convinced that that's the way that we need to accept the process. I'm committed to a process, not a conclusion, and I understand that scientific methodology takes a long, long time. And so I'm not going to raise my expectations too far up because I will get too disappointed, okay? And so I'm going to be realistic with my expectations, reasonable with my expectations. And so for right now, I think suspending judgment is the best position to take. And yes, it's an opinion to the question of God. Do I form an opinion? Yeah. I have responded to the question. I don't know if there is a God. And I can take that further. I don't know if God exists. I don't know. Therefore, I'm suspending judgment. I'm not willing to take the position of atheism nor the position of theism. I don't find that leapfrogging into either ism makes sense if I'm to approach the question. And so multi-axial I am. And so thanks, Diana, for being on the show. And so once again, you act like you're not so much a confessed atheist anymore. Is that correct?
I have a feeling you may be correct. And as I say, I guess I need to find a different word. If a word is applicable at all, when I think about it, what I'm doing is I'm not really objecting to the existence of a god or gods or goddesses or however. I think I'm more objecting to what people try to do with that. And a lot of people try to do a lot of nasty things. I try to speak up about that, and it always devolves into the theist atheist language. maybe because that's what most people understand. I'd like to see people come to understand something more than that. As you say, I don't know if it's going to happen in my lifetime or not. I've got more life behind me than ahead of me also.
Someone made a comment, but you're a multi-axial theist. What? Okay,
Maybe.
now, okay,
Maybe.
but this is my point. When I look at philosophy, the way that philosophers play, they use a determinate nomenclature, and I get that, and that's for a very, very good reason, by the way. However, if I take a multi-axial approach, that is, if I'm going to be invested, that is, in the question of God, I'm not going to approach the question with the door closed. And by being multi-axial, I'm not going to assume that everything rests upon one axis. And so I'm willing to open up the door, that is, as wide as I can, to explore what kind of methodology that I could use that would explore something outside of an axis that I feel like I'm constrained to. In other words, if we look at it, if we're measuring everything based upon the same axis, the outcome is going to be consistently based upon what that axis provides. But if I'm trying to work outside of that particular kind of modality, it's going to require me thinking a bit beyond that. And so it's only in that sense that I confess that multi-axial approaches are good, useful. And so if I resonate with the exploration of God, if I resonate with the exploration of what that might mean, please don't hold that against me. But if that's just what you need to do, I get that. But I'm tired of this versus them mentality, us versus them mentality. I'm tired of that. I think that we need to back away from the great debate. I don't think it's great at all. In fact, I think that it's this narrative of againstness that keeps fueling people like this shooter. This shooter was fueled because he didn't have a place to go, that is, to get help. No one had any light. And it may be true that Diana has enough light to say to this young man, you know, let me share something with you and I can get you to, let's say, a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and you may get help and you may not go into a school shooting up the place. And so I think that, changing laws, that is, to deal with guns is one thing, but we learn from, let's say, some of these stories in the Bible, if we can use a Bible as a textbook for a moment, that the law can't do everything for us. And I think the Apostle Paul was right. He said, when he talked about the law, he said, I would have never known sin lest it be for the law. In other words, he felt like he was driven by law. And I'm afraid at times we think that somehow we can legislate character. We can legislate, something into a person that's ill. And I think that we're going to have to practice compassion, understanding, and we're going to have to find people who are sick and ill, and we're going to have to treat them with great bedside manners. That is, to be a physician to them. That is, in the sense of just being a caring human being that will simply say, you might not have had a father, and I'm willing to do everything that I can to help you to find connection so you won't be so frustrated in life. In other words, is it wrong to think that that this young man, before he went into this school, could have been saved? Not in the theological sense, but could have been somehow helped psychologically and maybe had a good life rather than going down the path that he did? What are your thoughts on that, Diana?
I would certainly hope that it could have been the case. Now, it did not turn out to be the case, but then there are other people like him. Could it be the case for them? And if it can be, and I think it can, we've got to do something about that. You talk about the law. There's a difference between the law and the heart, if you want to put it that way. The way people look at other people and treat other people. A doctor of mine, this just came to my mind, many years ago, said to me, you Americans are lawless. That is why you have so many laws. And he had a point. We have all the legal points in place, partly because we're not doing enough within our own selves to behave well. So it has to be legislated upon us. It would be better if we got to the point where we could behave compassionately on our own initiative. We might not need as many laws.
I agree with you. I had a fantastic father. I have a fantastic mother. My wife is amazing. She is my Lord. She is my God, my Savior, and all that. Other people are not so lucky. Other people are not that fortunate to have people who nurture them in life. And so we can continue to make law after law after law and try to legislate things to be right. But I happen to think that people like Jesus and Paul were right. We need people to extend grace. In other words, sometimes we needed to have a system that would do something for individuals even though they don't deserve it. And, you know, if you're always just doing things for other people because they deserve something, you're not being very gracious is my point. And that's only one usage of charis. I find in life that there's a young man who, well, he's not young, he's close to 60, and he comes by occasionally because he's without food, without housing, and he should be incarcerated, but it has to do with grace as to why he's not, because he didn't feel like he had any options in life other than to steal. And I started talking to him and simply suggesting there's a better path that is for you. I offered grace. I gave him something that he didn't deserve. He deserved to be locked up for the things that he had done. He had stolen so many things. And I said, this is the better pathway. I gave him grace. And now this person has started to learn that, hey, I can rise above my current circumstances, and I don't have to live like I'm just some wretched, wicked person. I can live as if I'm valuable. And this person has become like that. But that took some time, and it took lots of nurturing. It took lots of kindness extended toward that individual. It took a lot of forgiveness. And this is something that I think that we're missing in America, is that nurturing. A mother knows how to nurture children in a way that's all about unconditional love and acceptance, and that's what people need. A good father knows how to put lots of good self-esteem into their children, and this is what we need. People need to have self-worth, self-value, and that poor individual who went into that school system, they didn't think well of themselves. They didn't think well of other people. It was, I mean, they needed help. And so I don't think that the only thing that we need to form is law. We need to form modalities in which we can express ourselves in a context of compassionism. We need to approach people in that context. And so I'm not for the mean-spirited approach. I'm for the Andy Griffith mindset of law. The guy doesn't have a gun, and he approaches most people just simply to talk and be kind and be friends with them. And that tends to take people who are enemies and say, no, I don't have to be mean to Andy Griffith. I can work with him. And so, but from time to time you do get a Barney Fife, do we not? And so it's kind of strange. But I'm thankful that the shooter didn't kill any more than he did. And I'm thankful that maybe some of the gun laws will change. That's where I am at on this question of the gun issue. And so I hurt for all of the victims. Our heart goes out to all the victims. And so maybe we can have some of these school kids on this show, just sharing their heart, because they've gone through so much pain. I can't imagine. And so with that said, we're going to get out of here. And we love all of you guys, but let's get a little bit more honest to the question. Okay, thank you, Diana, for being on.
And thank you for having me around.